and here's this kid playing slide and just blazing. But anyway, that's not part of what we're here for. But Steve Berlin is his name. He plays in Los Lobos. He's the sax player in Los Lobos. He's the honorary Jewish Mexican in Los Lobos. But he was in this jazz band we played together back in Philadelphia, playing soprano sax through a pickup, and he played the sax like a combination of a slide guitar player and a harmonica player. But with the pickup and the sound through the amp, the soprano, I mean, he bent notes and did all kinds of things that were very, very interesting and innovative. He doesn't play soprano very much as far as I know anymore, but that was his one thing that he did back then. So I did that jazz thing for a while. That was 75. And then I got a call to go to California and play with Ingrid Croce, who was Jim Croce's widow. Jim Croce was a pop writer, guitar player, singer. What was it? Big Bad Jim and some other pop hits that he had. So that got me to California in San Diego, and I worked with her for 6 months or so. Nothing happened. She was trying to get a deal, and it didn't happen. And so there I was, stuck in San Diego with not much of a music scene there. Didn't know anybody. But in the interim, Steve Berlin, the soprano sax player from the jazz group in Philly, had moved to L.A. because when I left the band, that there were some other personnel things, and they just decided to give it up. And Steve moved to California also, but he moved to L.A., which is where the music was happening. So after 6 months in San Diego, I moved up and moved in with Steve. Had to work in bar bands in L.A. for a while, which was so different from what I had experienced a few years ago back east. The music scene had changed a lot. Disco was starting to, disco was like the big new thing, and people didn't give a damn about good music. They didn't care if you played a blazing solo or not. They were just there to get drunk and score and dance, So it was awful. I mean, the bar band scene in California at that time was just awful, but I had to endure it for a few months because I had nothing else to do. I had to make a living. And then I started to make some inroads in the studio scene, and I got enough work there that I could thankfully leave this horrible L.A. bar band thing. And then I got a call, interestingly enough, from a bartender that heard me play back east with the good bands back there, who had come in contact with Orleans. He had gone from being a bartender to a sound man at one of the clubs where the better bands played in Philadelphia, and he called me and said Orleans is looking for somebody else to join the band. You running out of tape there?
Yeah.
No, we got time. So I went back to New York, to Woodstock, and auditioned for Orleans, and was in the band. And in the interim, between the time that I auditioned for the band, which was fall of '77, and the time that the band actually started to do something, which was over a year later, fall of '78, I did that summer of '78. I was on the Rolling Stones tour with Etta James, who I had started playing with. One of the first things I did when I got to L.A. was one of the first jobs I picked up was Etta James, and that was a lot of fun because, again, and this has happened many times in my career, I had a chance to play with somebody that I had heard as a kid and just really loved. And I saw Etta when I was 8 years old. I saw Etta on Bandstand, and a lot of other artists like that. And with Frank too. I first became aware of him in '66 when I graduated high school, and I was blown away. And later in life, I got a chance to play with these people and other people as well, like Michael McDonald, who I really liked. I became aware of his work quite a few years before I actually toured with him. So that was a lot of fun, and playing with Etta was great. That was really the place that I started to get my vocal chops together, was working with Etta. We would do she could tell that I had it. I had it in here. And she would sort of draw me out, and we would do duets together. She would do a lick, and I'd do a lick, and we'd sort of, lead and chase and follow each other around. And that was the place that I really put it together as a singer. In that style, in R&B and more pop kind of styles. So that was all kind of good preparation for Frank, which was to come a few years later. I did the 78 Stones tour with Etta, and then Orleans actually went in. We went into the studio, the record plant in New York, and did an album. Fall of '78 through beginning of '79, and the album was released, and it was doing very well. There was one cut in particular that was a hit. In fact, it was the biggest hit the group ever had. In terms of sales. But then, there were some personnel weirdnesses, and the band broke up. So there I was again, kind of like in limbo. I had been sort of bi-coastal. I still kept my place in L.A., but that band was based in Woodstock, so I was kind of going back and forth. And the band broke up, and in fall of '80, I went back to L.A. again. And I was struggling. I hooked up with Etta. I did some things with her, and the studio scene was starting to change. There wasn't nearly as much going on there, so it was really tough. And then summer of '81, just less than a year later, I got a call again from a guy that was he was involved with Orleans. He was a sound guy, a tech named David Robb, and he. At this point, was working for Frank. He I don't know how that hooked up actually, but he had hooked up with Frank, and he was watching Frank tear his hair out trying to find the last person for the band for the '81 tour. He had Tommy Mars on the primary keyboard spot, and Chad Wackerman had just joined the band. Scott Tunis had just joined the band. Ray White was in the band. Ike was not in the band on that first tour that I did with Frank. Ed Mann was there, Steve Vai was there, so it was a great band, and Frank was just not able to find the last person that he needed to fill out the band. So David Robb told him about me. He said, "Look, I know this guy that plays a lot of things. He sings great. You ought to check him out. He's got classical background, all this kind of stuff." And so Frank said, "Yeah, give him a call, bring him down here." So Dave called me and said, "Be here tomorrow." And I had already heard about the various Zappa audition horror stories that people had endured. So I figured, what the hell? I'm just going to wing this. I'm not even going to try to prepare anything. Even though I knew a few things from back in the bar band days, 10 years earlier, but I figured I'll just go with what I've got. I'll just wing it. So I went in and first he had me sight read some keyboard things. I think the first thing was envelopes, and so
not the easiest thing.
No, not easy at all. But again, with my classical background, I could read, so it wasn't a problem. My technique wasn't blazing like Tommy's or anything like that, but I could read, and when it got too difficult to get everything, I would just read the top line and the top of the chord or the melody or whatever, so that he could see I was comprehending and following the metric changes and the the harmonies and all.
What do you think that it's all about with that piece? What's the basic point of that piece?
The point of envelopes?
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. To me, it never had one. It wasn't my favorite Zappa piece, I got to tell you.
Okay.
It had some interesting things going on harmonically, but it always felt a little tedious and purposefully ugly to me. Now, if that's the effect you want, if you want to, annoy people, that piece did it for me. And sometimes that's what he was after. He just wanted to do something that would just like not be pretty, not be an attractive sound.